Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Richest Men in Town podcast. I'm Mike Freeman, and along with my good friend and co-host Tyler Gould, we're excited to welcome you to our little podcast project. Tyler and I are just a couple of middle-aged husbands and dads driven to live our best lives. We want to be better every day, so here we'll be sitting down with great people. Not famous people, but great people that we admire, to learn their secret to living the rich life. Probably not the rich life you're thinking of. Our guests come in humbled and surprised at the invitation and hopefully leave feeling proud and grateful, realizing just how good they really have it. So pull up a chair, stay a while, and raise a glass with us as we toast our guests to the richest men in town. All right, Tyler Gould. Latest episode of the Richest Men in Town. We're bringing somebody back, but we've done the bring people back in order to get updates on people's lives. This time, it's for real, because when we talked to Troy Blanchard, he was about to make a crazy pivot in his life. We bring his wife Daphne on. We get an update. What are you walking away with from our time with Troy and Daphne tonight?
Man, I mean, I don't really know where to start. I would just say that I think a lot of our conversation centered around inspiration. How do we recognize inspiration? What does that look like? How do we have courage to act on that inspiration? And I'm not going to go into what they taught us as it pertains to those details, but I would say this is a great listen if you're faced with some decisions and you're wondering how to proceed, right? Because it's easy for us in life to kind of bring up the stumbling blocks for us right out of the gates, right? We have a good idea, we bring up the stumbling blocks and say, but these things are going to make us fail. And I think the Blanchards really teach us about how to look at those and how to move past those. And I loved it, man.
Well, and how to win that wrestle.
Yeah.
You know, how to win that wrestle and be true to the feelings that we feel. Because when we, who knows where people are at? Right. You may be in Tanzania hanging out, one of our biggest fans, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
People are dealing and people are feeling. And I think in order to really learn and come to terms with those things that we're feeling and turn those things into action, this is a master class.
Totally.
Troy and Daphne drop it, and and granted, the example is a drastic one.
Sure.
But in the context of the conversation that we have, we are alluding to, hey, not everybody listening is going to be in this drastic change situation. And you're going to find ways to apply what we talk about tonight.
Yeah, I think that, one of the things that Daphne talks about in this is trusting inspiration, but trusting yourself as well, right? Trusting the experiences that you've had, trusting the things that you might chalk up to meaningless or less than significant events in your life that have shaped you, right? And ultimately they lead to putting you into a position of success on the path. And I just thought that was phenomenal to hear her talk about that.
Yeah, I'm on the edge of my seat, and actually the more we talk, the longer they have to wait to listen to them. So let's just cut right to it, right?
Let's do it.
Let's cut right to it. Amidst chaos, the Blanchards receive answers. They receive them in different ways. And I think that that's true. God has many different ways to talk to his many different children, and we're all different. But man, that idea that Troy shares, shed everything else. And in the end, are we following those things that are going to lead us to be better, to be the best versions of ourselves? And that's what we're getting with the Blanchards. So Tyler, good to be with you. Good to be back with Troy and to meet Daphne. And they're remarkable. And I know listeners are going to enjoy this episode with the Blanchards on the Richest Men in Town. Hey!
Hi.
Hey, guys.
Troy and Daphne Blanchard. Welcome to the Richest Men. Welcome back, Troy. Daphne, nice to meet you.
Thank you. Great. I love being part of the boys. I feel like I'm a kid with my two older brothers again.
Awesome.
I'm just hoping that you don't throw me down, not throw, but lovingly roll me down the staircase in a box.
I lovingly threw some of my, or rolled some of my sisters downstairs when I was a kid as well.
I loved it though. I kept coming back for more.
Well, hey, we were actually being pretty vulnerable before we opened up the doors and let you guys in. We are feeling a little bit of overwhelmed with life and tasks. And Tyler and I both confess to one another that when the task list gets long, we like to just play dead.
That is the truth.
We like to play dead and ignore it and think, everything's going to go away. And I doubt that is the Blanchard family way of doing things.
Oh no, I believe that that's a healthy thing to do every once in a while. I lock myself in my room all by myself, set a timer, put on some meditative music with like a perfect chocolate truffle and just play dead, like you say.
No, definitely. She does.
Really healthy.
Yep.
I like that. I need to adopt that because mine right now is pretend like nothing is happening and see how long I can make that last.
Been there.
Yeah.
Well,
how are you guys?
Tyler, you likened it. We were talking a little bit about one of your kids, and you likened it to a bear attack, right?
Yeah. So I was just talking about this. You guys know my youngest, right? You know Gwendolyn.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And so, as you guys know, as parents, all of your kids are totally different, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Personalities are all over the place. And with Gwen, we know that, motivation's different when it comes to schoolwork than my other kids, right? So when things pile up and she feels stressed about a topic or a class or whatever it is, hers is like the flight or what is it? The flight or fight, right? She's like run away or play dead. That's sort of her strategy. So, and it's funny because Ricky and I were talking about this the other day and we're like, this is kind of where she's at. And we got to help motivate her to not get into that play dead mode. And as I was driving into work and I was like, dude, I'm totally playing dead right now on a bunch of things in my own life. I got to figure that out. So
get your truffle, get your truffle, get your meditation
set the timer,
lock the door.
Yes.
The timer's key though, right? Because right now I'm just like, let's see how long I can ignore this before it really becomes a big fat issue. So anyway, I like the timer idea. I'm going to adopt it.
So Daphne, talk to me about when the timer's up, what do you do?
Well, sometimes if you really need to fulfill that id, you just set it for another 15 minutes. It's like crazy out there. Or you just say, you know what? I'm just quitting on life today. And you know what? That's one thing that we talk about with our kids is it's okay occasionally to just say, I'm quitting on it today and just fully embrace it. And I found with myself that if I didn't do it in a way that was like intentional, I would end up stealing that time anyway in destructive ways so I find that if I just give it to myself, go all in, and then the next day
she crushes it.
Let's go for it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's that idea NBA coaches are using with the load management. Right.
So much I can contribute. Yeah. Go ahead.
So some 12-year-old is dreaming of going and watching LeBron James play basketball, and he's never been to a pro game, and his parents spend $1,000 for the ticket. The 12-year-old sits down to find out LeBron's taking the night off because wants to manage the load.
Just for the record, I think LeBron's taken all 6 or 7 games off this year, regardless of where they're at. No, that's interesting though. I like the idea of like intentionally like making the decision, because there has been times where, like if for me, like there'll be times where I'll like look back and say, okay, let's kind of take inventory of what I accomplished and what I spent my time on. And if I'm really honest, there's chunks of time that are just wasted time in that, whether it's because I chose not to do this task, or I felt like I just couldn't mentally get there, or whatever it is. So I like the idea of just being able to say, hey, look, your head's not in it. Call it good. And then let's circle back to it.
It won't be your best work, right? So just go ahead.
Yeah, totally.
But hey, I will tell you, I will tell you what I'm not a big fan of, though. Now that my kids are in college and they're calling up and they're checking on us, right? And the family check-ins and things. And it's like, hey, what have you guys been up to? And Kelly and I look at each other like, life. I think they're expecting us to have like 17 new things or like we're pickleballers now or something. And like I got nothing.
Pickleball.
And I feel shame.
Yeah.
That's funny.
I will say though, like, okay, are you guys familiar with the app Be Real?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have this Be Real like, you know, and they're always like, hey, let's keep track of each other this way. And the Be Real seems to pop up only when I'm sitting on the couch. Like I'm like, can you? I've done stuff today. Can you catch me in the middle of one of those things?
You got 2 minutes to just hurry and do something cool.
So you can be authentic.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
I think we're missing the point.
Yeah, so I have to run out to a pickleball court real quick and put on my headband and pretend like I'm playing. You know. So anyway,
That's so funny.
Well, okay, so let me just back up. I am so excited to have you guys back on. Troy, I don't know if we have ever let you know, but your episode number 43, way back March 1st, 2021, is currently the highest
What?
rated,
Are you serious?
most downloaded episode of The Richest Men in Town.
I've got to tell you, I still look back at that, and that night was full of inspiration, and I feel like I was just an instrument. I feel like all of us were. The comments that you guys said, that just the topics that came out. And what was cool is you guys get to experience this. I infrequently get to experience this, but the texts, right? The text out that are like, oh my gosh, I'm making a pivotal decision. I'm at a hinge moment in my life. And your podcast is what brought me a certain direction. And that's what I see the beauty of what you guys have put together is that you're touching these lives and people are praying for inspiration. One of my favorite quotes, I actually heard it from Ashton Buswell that was on here, but good inspiration is based upon good information, right? And I feel like a lot of us are seeking inspiration, and we don't, we have to seek after information as well. And this is one of the platforms where we can get on and really tap into best practices and fine-tuning ourselves into that divine communication, that miracle that takes place that people so often overlook and don't recognize as a miracle. And that episode, I just super grateful for you guys for inviting me. It was fantastic. I was super excited that my wife is here this time.
Yeah.
we're excited too, man. So let me ask you, both you, Daphne and Troy, you talk about inspiration, and maybe we can spend a couple minutes and dig into that idea of inspiration a little bit, because you guys have obviously made some changes, right? There's been some, you're living in Ecuador, right? So there's some things have changed. And I'm curious from your perspective, what does that inspiration process look like for you? And I guess I asked that question because it can be a little bit different for everybody, right? For one. And for two, I think that, I love the idea of good information leads to inspiration, right? Mm-hmm. Because I think sometimes there's this idea that it's just going to come as a bolt of lightning, right? And we're just going to get this flash of information, and that's going to be the thing that's going to propel us to do this great thing. And I would love to hear your thoughts on sort of the process, maybe. Can we dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, it's super cool because we were talking about this decision to come to Ecuador, and Troy has like a really powerful emotional story. And I was like, no, I don't really have that. And then as we were talking, I realized, oh, my process is totally different. So I don't know if you want to dive into that. Troy.
I think, to back up, we were on this episode and I had already come to a point. In fact, you guys deleted it. Thank you. But we had come to a point.
It was right on the cusp, right?
Yes.
This whole thing.
We're right there.
Yeah. And we were living in San Diego, just loving it down there, neighbors to Tyler. And Our friends, our kids all hang out together. Life was really good. And I had a great job. On my last episode, I talked about how much I learned from this great mentor and company. And one day I get a text from a friend that says, I need to pivot in life. I need to make a change. And all of a sudden I got emotional. And we have guests over that have a family.
Hold on. Your friend texts saying they need to, or text saying you need to?
They need to.
And so you read that and you get overcome.
I get over. Yes. And at the time, this is not, I think some of the times that I get these inspirations are while chaos is taking place, because, the family friends are over, they're packing, they have 10 in their family, everybody's like, we're going to the beach, load up. And I am just headed upstairs. The entire family, our family of, 6 is exiting into this direction. And all of a sudden I'm getting this feeling of you need to make a change. And at the time I was working really hard to become president of the company where I was at. I was on track with everything in my career goals. And I went upstairs and I immediately, I felt it strongly. I needed to leave. And I didn't understand why it was coming like this. And my wife walks in, and as I express it to her, like, we're supposed to leave Canon. I can't believe we're supposed to leave this company. I love this company. And she walks in and we're hugging and talking. And all of a sudden my kids are all in the car, like, where are my parents? And they run upstairs and I'm getting emotional, and they keep coming in the door. And then, usually this happened when I told the story about Costa Rica last time on that episode you're talking about, where, one of my daughters comes in and says, are we moving again? Because like, mom and dad receiving inspiration.
They got that face. Yeah.
But that was like the drop. And if you were to say, hey, walk away right now from what you're doing, walk away from your career, move, sell, get out of your house, whatever the situation is, and up and move to a new country with no job. That's the inspiration through this journey that you'll probably hear about tonight. But this was the first step. The first step was, I didn't know where we're going. I just felt like we were supposed to leave.
Which is interesting because he's having this moment. And my thought in that moment was like, oh, good, Troy's on board, because I had been feeling it for so long. And it was coming to me in these little, just clear thoughts, like I would walk down the stairs, look at our beautiful house, happy kids everywhere, teenagers. And for some reason, when I look at the bookshelf, the thought is clear as day, stay nimble. And so when the option comes up later, do we buy the house because we'd been renting, because we didn't know, we didn't come into those houses knowing how long we're going to be there. And that decisions were made based on those two very simple words, stay nimble. Another one is sitting at the table as he's telling me about work. And the thought clearly comes, Troy, in his patriarchal blessing, talks about get as much education as you can so that you can spend your time serving. And his education is done. Like, it's time for you to take that education and share it with other people. And, at the top of a mountain and watching a video, I get a flood of this is the direction you need to go. So for me, it comes in these little increments, like these little clear, feels like just illuminations of light and thought, but they come with a really powerful feeling to it. So I actually have a yellow sticky note that is like daily inspirations. And as they come, I just write them down. And it's amazing because we actually had to go back. This process is like a year and a half. It was years in the making. But really, when we decided that we were going to do this, it was yet another year and a half of like working towards that while still trying to keep our life as normal as possible. And it took daily inspirations to keep us on track. For me, they came in just like subtle, clear lines of thought that kept us focused on that direction.
Oh, man. Tyler, what are we going to do with that? Like, you just mentioned how different kids are, right? Here's the crazy thing. Like, Troy's doing his thing, trying to stay close to the Holy Ghost, right? I know we had talked in the episode about morning routines and those things that you do to tune in spiritually. So it wasn't like you weren't plugged in. Daphne's doing her thing plugged in. She's getting daily drips, and there's a flood waiting for Troy, right? When Troy gets his answer, it's like the dam breaks and it hits him all at once. And I just think that's just fantastic evidence of just how amazing our Heavenly Father is, right? And how unique each of his children truly are.
I think that's a really fun thing in parenting, is helping your kids understand. Not only, we say it's not how smart you are, it's how are you smart. And so helping them understand how they think. And then the next thing is, it's not, are you getting inspiration? It's how do you receive inspiration? So helping each one. And one of my favorite examples is our daughter, Bree. She loves words. She's a writer. She's a songwriter. And so all her inspiration comes in the form of scriptures, songs, poetry, words. It always comes in the form of words for her. And the day that we had that light bulb moment where she told me, Mom, I figured it out, this is how I get revelation, was such a powerful day for me and for both of us. And we felt the Spirit testify that was her specific way of receiving it. And it's one of the most amazing things about being a parent, is helping your kids identify those things.
Unlock that, right?
Yeah. And I think we could probably rewind a little bit and talk about how we learn what inspiration feels like for each individual person, right? But my question to you guys, and maybe we can dig into that a little bit, but I'm curious, when inspiration comes, right? And in your case, inspiration comes and says, hey, leave your job, move to another country. Like, that sounds awesome, but that sounds terrifying at the same time, right? So my question is, where does the courage come from to act on that? And because it's one thing to hear it and one thing to recognize it. Okay, I'm recognizing this as inspiration, as inspired thought. Now, how do I step off the edge of this cliff and take the leap?
We're both going to have a little bit of story in this, because we had, the previous episode, I had talked a little bit about, we'd moved our family to Costa Rica, 4 kids, and the challenge and the great inspiration of what came of that. But now we're back, secure, super happy in San Diego, right? Great experience. And, when it comes to the struggle, once I knew I had to leave, it was months after where I really knew where I was supposed to go. And I was down here in Ecuador. We had joined up. We every 3 years we do a big service project here with a bunch of our friends, and we had this great idea with a bunch of us that, and when I'm talking like the last service project collectively with locals and, 100, 120 people over 4 days are doing these projects. And we're like, hey, why don't we start a farm that can help fund our humanitarian efforts? So we had done that. And I was down here checking on the farm, and I was with our friends. And I had always thought it meant I need to pivot to a different career there in Southern California, right? And so I'm out in the middle of nowhere in what they call the jungle here. And I get this clear thought, oh, you should move here. And I literally chuckled. I'm like, why did I think of that? Like, I'm here. I mean, I can't even get to like running water where I was at the time. I mean, there was no phone signal where I was at the time. And so the thought of it coming like, you should move here, I thought, well, that was kind of weird. And then I counted in 24 hours, 5 times I thought of that. And then I'm on the plane coming home from Ecuador. And this is right as the breakout of COVID. We were up in the mountains 5 hours away from the airport. The president of Ecuador gets on and says, get out of the country of 24 hours. All foreigners get out. Right. And so I get down to the airport, I get on a plane and we're leaving. I put on some action-packed, movie on the plane. And in the middle of this, again, we're like almost in chaos, right? They're handing out drinks. I'm watching some action show. And all of a sudden the clear thought is, you need to move to Ecuador. And I literally stopped the video and had this moment where, as I started to write it down, what I was feeling that was so strong. And here now I got a I got to communicate that to Daphne, right? Of where we're going to go. And so, that's the big leap going into it. Now, actually, thereafter was the true struggle. It's the true trial of faith. It's the true of turning to saying, how do I replace my income? What are we going to do when we get there? And then also the constant doubt. It's like the beans, right?
Yeah. So there's a talk that we love by Lauren Dalton called "You Are Receiving Revelation. Now act on it." And he mentions this concept that has become scripture in our family. It's this first and second being, and it's been so helpful. I've taught it to the youth when I was in the ward with Tyler. And I feel like every person needs to understand this concept because it's been life-changing, because we feel like if you get inspiration, then you're going to feel guided all the way through. And if you don't, then, I guess that inspiration was wrong. But really, the first inspiration is pure inspiration from God, and you know it and you feel it and it's powerful. The second being is from the other source, and it's doubt and it's confusion. It's like self-doubt and what are we going to do? And this can't really be inspiration, and all that negative thoughts flood in, and you have to battle it at that point of like, you have to, and that's why I kept those daily inspirations to keep on track, because you have to fight with yourself at that point to stay connected to that original being, which was directly from God.
I think to give two quick examples, two stories. I was doubting, and what had happened is after we had this dialogue, I came home and I told Tegan, and this when we were moving here would be Tegan's senior year, which he had here in Ecuador, in Quito. And so I came home and I told Tegan, and Tegan had told me 3 years before. He said, I want to go to my senior year in France or somewhere abroad. And which is not usually your normal, teenager will say, hey, after I've made all my tight friends and I'm really close friends, I want to bail when it comes to the year of celebrating me. But he had mentioned that, and he was on board. But now fast forward to when it's actually time to leave, I had gone through several doubts. So one of the two quick stories, the first one, I came home and we'd already had the first being. We'd all as a family knew it. Tegan said, I feel it too. I came home one day and I'm just like, how are we supposed to do this? Like sell all of our cars and just like, and what am I going to do for income for the next year? And Tegan was laying on the couch. I always remember he always has his shirt off. He sits up and he looks and he throws his pillow down and he says, we received inspiration. We know we're supposed to go and it's going to work. And he like dropped the pillow, like dropping the mic, and he stormed upstairs and he was done. He's like, we're not discussing this. It's going to happen. And my first thought was, yes, he's right. And my second being was, of course, but he doesn't know what it's like to provide for a family, right?
Yeah.
So it's that
second being, yeah.
It's that second being. And so these kept coming and coming. And I remember it was December 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, right around there. And I'm an XPEDX and I'm trying to ship something. And I'm walking out. The parking lot's crazy because over there at XPEDX, you got, In-N-Out Burger, and you've got the grocery store, and right where I'm talking to. And so it's there in East Lake. And Ashton Buswell walks up and he's like, hey, how you doing? And I feel like this bubble, it was loud at the time, just dropped over us. I could not hear anybody. It was the most incredible experience. I didn't notice people were driving in and out. And I just said to him immediately, it's same thing if Tyler would have said it, or if I would have ran into Mike, I said, I'm struggling is what I'm doing. And he's like, what are you struggling about? And he had known the plans about Ecuador. And at that point, I just said, there's just so many challenges of leaving. And he taught me something that I think his life coach that he's working with, or maybe it just came from him, but he talked about, are you worried about stability? And I said, well, yeah. And he said, let me ask you a question. Tomorrow, if your house burns down and your car is in it, do you have the ability to go and re-earn those things back? I'm like, well, yeah. He's like, why do you have that ability? Because I've gathered skills and education and experience through life. And he goes, so if you have ability, wouldn't that make you stable? And I said, yeah. And he's like, what are you afraid of? Let me ask you this. What is going to be the byproduct of your family if you move to Ecuador? Will you grow closer to your son? I'm like, oh my gosh, I'll spend more time with him his senior year than I probably would have the previous 4 years. What about your wife? Obviously more time with her because
so in the middle of this chaos, you and Buswell are having a coaching session, and he's got all of this at the ready.
Yes, what's interesting is this was one of the, the pivotal moments for me when it was, I would say after the 25th doubt, even knowing that we had to go. So when you say after you receive the revelation, it was tough. Yeah. And that was a pivotal moment where I hadn't fully committed. I kept saying we're going to go. But if we didn't go, you know what I mean? And I think at that point, when he said that, and he said, if you went down there and didn't make anything, and you got to spend a full year with Ash and spend more with Tegan, which my daughter spent a lot of time down here, and with your wife, and you came back a year later, what would that be worth? What would it be worth? The salary that you're making? And if you just skip a year in salary, would it be worth that? And then he went on to talk about inspiration. And I remember when we were done talking and it got to the moment we're done and we needed to go, I was so moved that I went in the car, and I still have the note. I voice recorded myself for 10 minutes saying, I don't want to stop talking about this because I'm afraid the feeling will go away. I'm afraid doubt will come back when I know God wants us to move down here. And so that was the real point for me. That was the tipping point that it's like, it's going to happen.
And as you can hear from this story, Troy is so dedicated to protecting the family and keeping our stability, and has played a really amazing role in that throughout our marriage. I'm super grateful for that chip inside of him. And then I feel like my role has been much like Eve in constantly pushing us out of the Garden of Eden. Every time we reach a point where it's cushy, beautiful, the fruit is spontaneously growing, I get this, as I think it was Sister Craig said, this divine discontent. You're like, all right, time to grow. And so it's interesting because
isn't that what led up to Costa Rica?
Absolutely. Yes.
Right. It was like, I didn't sign up for this. I signed up for an adventure.
Yes. Yeah. Like growth. I don't know why. And I've said this, I don't know why I can't be like I say normal people, why I push for growth, because the first being is growth. And the second being is like, you make your life so hard and it's unnecessary. But
go ahead. No, keep going.
It's interesting because when Troy is in protector mode, I feel so emboldened and empowered by the Spirit to be in progress mode. I feel confident. I'm very convincing, and it feels like the Spirit flows through me. I have no fear. I can squelch any of his concerns. It's all about trust in the Lord. I trust his plan. It's better than ours. And then the minute Troy gets on board and we're now living in our downsized rental house. I mean, it's our rental, but all the students had left for COVID, and we've now left our life in California. We're in our little house. Everything's packed in our garage. We're in that transition mode. We're 1 month away from moving to Ecuador. That's when my second being hits me. And then I'm like, the losses, like we've sold assets, cars, people our age, the little beings come in, like people your age have this type of living, or people your age, you know what I mean? Like all these little thoughts creep in, like you have made Troy give up his dream job. It's because of you that you are sitting in this little house alone while he's up working a contract in Salt Lake City, and so it's interesting how mine comes right before, like right at the end of that big push.
Well, I love the complementary pieces, right? It's almost like when Tegan's on the couch. Imagine if you were both down.
Yeah, you're right.
Imagine if you stood up and said, you know what, Dad, all that stuff about senior abroad, screw that.
Totally.
Right? But that idea of I'm low, you're high, you're low, I'm high, and we're going to be okay. I love the play there, right? That because that's true companionship. And I think that I shudder to think if I was ever low and my wife was low.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's just something beautiful about being, I'm up, she's down, I'm down, she's up, and that's how it just happens to work out.
I love this whole idea of trusting that first inspiration and recognizing where that second piece of doubt is coming from. When I hear your guys' story, I like sports. It reminds me of, it's like sort of Doug Flutie throwing the bomb for Boston College and scoring that touchdown. But, and I think I want to get to the practical application for people that are listening to this podcast, right? Because for some people, change is the most terrifying thing ever, right? But even knowing that you have this fear of change, we all get that prompting sometimes that, hey, it's time to shift, it's time to pivot, it's time to move on from this thing, right? And you guys went for the Hail Mary, right? But maybe somebody is just trying to hit a single to get on first base. What advice would you have to that person that says, hey, I want to make change, but I am plain dead for the bear because I don't want to make this change right now, right? How do you what would you say to someone about embracing? I love Ashton's advice. I think that's probably applicable, but what would you guys say to that?
I've got a quick thought.
Go ahead.
You go next. You guys started off by your very first statements right off the bat. You talked about you both got vulnerable, right? When you were talking about the topic, and change leads to vulnerability. Anytime you get a new job or you get promoted, the first thing that you feel is vulnerable because you don't know what that new job that you're walking into tomorrow and going into work, or you don't know if you're going to get this, you walk into a new office is a different promotion, or they transfer you within a company, or maybe it's service. You get assignment or receive a calling, as we would say too, and that you instantly feel vulnerable. And that is the segue. It's the main principle that change, it seems to always invoke. And then you have to, through this vulnerability, it opens you up for the ability to learn. And you suddenly become more open-minded and you're listening more to other people, and so I think that when that change is coming and you feel that change, and even though you're scared of it, it's healthy. You need to lean into it. You need to embrace it. You need to go forward and say, look, and recognize it. I am feeling vulnerable because I feel uneasy. And so therefore I need to depend on others and I need to depend on God.
And another example, which is something that may connect with other people, which is not connected to moving abroad, is after raising our kids. I got my bachelor's 20 something years ago. I decided and felt really prompted to go back to get my master's degree. So talk about throwing yourself into a new experience. And I mean, I had to teach myself, my kids had to teach me math to pass the GRE. Just enough to get into the program. I mean, my English pulled my 19% math score up, just enough. But it was crazy because I got into this program and the first being is like, yes, this is right. And you go for it and you're excited and you're enthusiastic and you need that energy to propel you so it gains traction enough to get into the program. And then I go to the first opening, meet and greet, and I'm like, I don't belong here. I put everybody on a pedestal. They're coming from big name jobs. Like I sat on the Dominican Republic desk at the UN, or I'm over civil affairs in the Army, or whatever it was, and I'm like, I'm a mom of 4, but I really undervalued my experience getting to that point. And so at that moment where I was like, I'd gone from a language degree to an international relations degree. And in my first day of class, I thought, would it have killed you to take the 101 class first? So I was way in over my head. So one of my favorite quotes that has helped me in these type of scenarios is by, he's a Swedish architect. Have you ever seen that movie, the series on Apple TV called Home? And really good, it's really amazing. And he's an architect. His name is Anders Solvarm, and he decides to build a Swedish log cabin encased in a greenhouse. And so what he said has never left me. He said, sometimes you have to be stupid enough to start this kind of thing, and then brave and persistent enough to finish it. So sometimes you just keep your butt in the seat and you just keep showing up until you start feeling like you belong there. And what was so cool was these people that I held on this pedestal, they taught me and helped me see what my value was. You know, they were like, wow, I don't know how you manage a house and 4 kids and do a master's at the same time, you know? And they'd say things like, you have on the ground Latin American experience. I wish I had that. And so over time, by staying in it, I was able to overcome that fear. And it was amazing to see how I evolved in the process, because I was able to be vulnerable, like Troy said.
And
I just love how quickly you were able to connect that vulnerability to that imposter syndrome, because as Troy was explaining that vulnerability and, you know, the transitions that sometimes life presents, there's so many times when right with that vulnerability comes that voice of like, you don't belong here, you know, and we just need to say straight up, I do not believe in a God that would ever say that.
Yeah.
You're right.
And so that's that second being, like, that's not going to be anything that we want to pay any attention to, because it's going to throw an anchor around your neck, and it's trying to get you to not do the thing that could be brilliant, right? It could be this thing that maybe you were born to do. We've all seen people doing things that they were born to do, and every one of them, if you sat down, they'd tell you, yeah, tell that person to shut up. Right? Tell that voice to shut up, or you'll never get where you need to get, where God needs you to be.
And the only way I could get through that program, I would listen on repeat this song called Am I Wrong? It's by Nico and Vince. But there's a phrase that says, walk and don't look back. Always do what you decide. And I had to repeat that to myself. Don't look back. Do what you decide, because that was the first thing. And then, like, I love how you said, God will never put that thought in your head of you don't belong here. What he put in my head was, I will magnify. Let me see what it says. The Lord will magnify your small and simple efforts. So I kept getting this feeling of like, I know you don't feel like you can do this. I know you feel like you don't belong, but I'll magnify it. You just bring what you got and I'll magnify it. And I still say that prayer almost every day.
Well, and I think one thing, so shameless plug, Discipline is Destiny is a book I'm reading right now. It's an incredible book, part of a series, but this idea of asking yourself when you want to give up, what's at stake? You know, because so many times I think that we're not even considering, and Tyler, we've talked about, you know, people are hitched to us. When we're struggling, the people that are hitched to us are going to feel those struggles. Sometimes we think, I'm going to make this mistake or whatever, and it's not going to be a big deal. The problem is there's the net loss of things when we're not living to be our true potential. It's not just the backwards that you went, it's the forward you didn't go. And when you start thinking about, like, not only am I descending, I'm not climbing. So that loss is huge to you, to the people in your world, to the impact that you could have in the world, right? And we just think, oh, I'm struggling. I'm gonna take my foot off the gas for a little bit. I'll give you a timer, some truffles, some music, and the timer's up, right? It's time to re-engage, because that net loss, God, when we hear God needs you, that's why.
Well, I don't want to be the guy that's like banging the drum of like, remember constantly.
Yeah.
Right? But like, if we're in this situation,
how many times have we said that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that I love what you said, Daphne, you talked about trusting the inspiration, but trusting yourself, right? That I have the ability to do this thing. And I think that, we sell ourselves short all the time. It just human nature, right? We walk into a room, we think everyone's better than we are. They're smarter than we are. They have more experience than we do, right? So we go through this whole process. But I think if we sat back and we took inventory on, okay, what have I done? What are some things that I've accomplished, right? And even in those moments where we're doubting ourselves, I think we can really compile a list, however small those are. And hey, you know what? I've trusted these inspirations before. I've seen the good that comes from doing these things.
Yeah.
I can recognize that if I'm faithful or if I'm courageous in these moments, that good things are going to come. And I think if we compile that list, it gives us that ability when we get to that point where we're like, Tyler, you need to move to Ecuador, right? Then it's like, well, shoot, I've got this list of things that I've done that have turned out right when I've trusted the process. I should be able to trust this process, even though it's a bit scarier or it's a bit bigger or it's a bit more overwhelming. I don't have to play dead. I can just embrace the moment and do that thing, right? And be confident.
And we got to check that script that's running in our head. How many times have we talked about
For
that
sure.
with other guests, right? Like, what do we tell ourselves? And I love Daphne with the Post-its, or, those, like, I'm going to listen to this song and I'm going to play it, and I'm going to program my thoughts, right? I'm going to, with input, I'm going to drive what is running between my ears, because what's running between your ears is going to dictate how you're going to live it out, right?
I love that concept of with input, because that's how it works for me. In my practical blessing, it talks about fill your mind with truth. And that's the thing that constantly, if I'm going down a negative spiral, it's fill your mind with truth. Oh yeah, you're right. And then I start reading something, I dig into something. It's amazing how that is exactly what I need to hear at that time. And then it becomes my mantra, and it gives me the strength to move on. But I have to feed myself with these positive things, like there's one from Brene Brown, like, today I'll choose courage over comfort, and I'm like, and I just have to tell myself that mantra, and it's powerful. Those inputs are really powerful.
Well, I think I love Troy's. I don't want to stop talking about this because I don't want to lose the feeling, because we know you'll lose things you see, you'll lose things that you had, but you'll never lose those feelings, right? Like Tyler, it's like, can you sing so now?
Right.
Sing the song of redeeming love. Like, can you sing so now? And I think that is so important. And those hot things, I was telling somebody who was, they were meeting with the missionaries, and they were, exploring whether or not, the Book of Mormon was true, whether or not church was something that they wanted to join. And I just said, hey, hot spiritual things are hot and they cool off very fast.
Yes.
So when you're meeting with the missionaries, or when you're reading the scriptures, focus on how you feel, because that heat that you feel, the world has a way of trying really hard to cool that thing down. And I love that idea of, like, I'm going to talk to myself in my own voice. I'm going to record this moment, so that when I'm down or something and I'm like, this is crazy, I need to stop.
It's interesting, because I think that looking back at the different steps, we saw the hand of God, right? We saw miracles that are arguably, in my mind, I couldn't see. Daphne couldn't see. Tegan, Ashlyn, our whole family, they couldn't see, and yet it happened. I was able to get a consulting job where I could be consulting in the US and still come and live here. And there's all these little miracles that happen along the way. But, to your point, it's so quickly we can forget it. It took literally an act of God to help us get here. And then when we got here, it's not like it was smooth. It's not like, the first time I heard the concept of Jesus take the wheel is obviously, well, maybe it's not obvious to everybody, but for me, it was Carrie Underwood, right?
Yeah, right.
The song comes out and I was like, whoa, what a concept. I love cars. It's so visual for me. And, I suddenly had to do that and literally realized it is not in our ability to fulfill whatever we're supposed to fulfill here unless I walk away from the wheel and quit trying to control our destiny. And when we hit the ground here, that cooling phase took place. And, there's this honeymoon, right?
Yeah, which is really cool that our kids know this curve, and it's helped them a lot. Like our son on the mission, he's like, I'm so glad that I experienced this, because he hits the 3-month mark and he's like, oh, honeymoon phase is over. I'm having a rough week. I'm happy, don't worry, but I'm having a rough week. But I know I know that it's only up from here. And in about 6 months, I'm going to be rocking it. And then by a year, I'm going to be crying because I only have a year left. Like to be able to recognize that pattern has been really helpful.
And that's what happened
awesome.
to us. That's what happened to us. You got down here and there's the first 3 months, amazing. And then all of a sudden, we don't know what we're supposed to be doing. And we're working 40 hours a week, both of us throwing tons of spaghetti against the wall, trying to start businesses and connect. And it wasn't something new for Daph. You know, when she started, when we first felt, or she first felt like we needed to be worldwide ready and she wanted to have her career, I knew that it was going to be at the expense at first at my career. And so she started our little small company, you know, years and years ago, and spent in her bedroom 30, 40 hours a week trying to get this company off the ground.
Talk about imposter syndrome. Oh my goodness. I'm like, this was Troy's inspiration, and Troy is, you know, the one with 20 years business experience. And I want to do in, you know, economic development in Latin America, but I never really wanted to do like on the ground business, you know, and, you know, again, who am I to think that I can pull this off, you know?
Yeah.
And then you roll forward real quick, and now all of a sudden 90 days are over here. But she's already been doing this for 2 years with trying to, you know, develop and export or connect and do different products. And, you know, in the room, I'm talking not a week or a month, try working for years with no income for her on her side. And then we get here, and then the collective efforts together, and month after month goes by, and we're like, I'm thinking while we're here has to do with creating businesses and jobs and some sort of benefit financially, I don't know, to stability for our future. And that wasn't the case, right? And that was when the cooling off periods, I wish I would have looked back like you guys suggest and say, hey, what were the inspirations that got me here? What were the ones that got me here? Because right now we're at the bottom of our rope. We're 6 months into this, and we're wondering, what are we doing here?
Well, and that sometimes gets into this conversation or this balance between process or results. Are we focusing on the process, or are we results? Are we results oriented, right? And I think in the end, you got to lean on like, hey, look, we're just in process mode right now, right? We are planting seeds in the ground, and who knows what's going to come, but we know this process is true. We're being true to the things that we feel, and come what may, right? And I think that, I think honestly, Tyler, I think of Doug McMullen, who's been on the program. He's got pioneer ancestry, and his pioneer ancestors came across the plains, landed in Zion, and this honeymoon, right? They're in Zion. First night, their horses get stolen in Zion, right? And they're like, and immediately everything just starts to unravel. Why did we come here? Right? All of these things. And they doubt it because they don't get the results. They don't get these things that were promised. Well, we're not promised anything.
Mike, that sounds amazing. And I agree with you 100%. But when you are in a place where, you know, you talk about results or process, right? And if you're in a place where you're like, all right, I got to make money to live. The result has to occur, right? There has to be a result. If there's not, you know what I mean? So like, I get what you're saying. I totally agree with what you're saying. But I'll tell you, if my horses got stolen Zion, I'd be like, son of you know what I mean? Like, what did we do?
But here's the other thing I will tell you too. Somebody brought up Lord's timing or God's timing, right? And I was just like, careful with that, because the God I know, sometimes your feet are wet and the water parts.
For sure.
Sometimes it's fourth watch and you get delivered from the storm, right? So sometimes we throw that God's timing out there like it's a super positive thing. A lot of times it is, right? I'm thinking of the Nephites in the Americas when Christ comes, and there's a date on the calendar where all believers are going to be put to death, and Nephi's like, hey. And the answer comes, tomorrow come I into the world, no worries. But like sometimes we are really pushed up against it, and it's almost like that checking us, right? Checking like where are you at?
Oh yeah. And I always really like my plans. I feel like I present them to the Lord like, this is awesome. And this is how we're all going to grow. And I really love it. So can we do it my way? And my way was like, graduate with my master's, get an awesome job with some international company and live internationally. So Troy and I had these moments where he's looking at me going, this is what you want. And I'm like, this is not what I wanted. And he's like, why are we here then? I don't know. So, I mean, I think it's important that we were really real and authentic with each other about it. We didn't make it personal. We kept it really focused on the situation, but being real about, man, this is not what we set out to do. This is, and to be real about that moment, to be vulnerable with each other, to be honest with each other. We had some hard conversations. I had hard ones of like, I don't want to do X, Y, and Z. And he's like, that's part of growing a business. I'm like, well, then I don't want to grow a business. He's like, well, sorry, but you're already here, and if you want to be in Ecuador, and I'm like, but this isn't the way I wanted it to be. So it's like, the Lord's plan, I know from experience, is always better than my plan. Well, it always grows me in ways that I'm really happy about after you get
through the process.
Right. And I think, go ahead.
Oh, I just want to share one of my favorite scriptures that helps me with this. It's Romans 8:18. For I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. And I love that, because when I read it, I think he's going to say like, my glory, or I don't know, but when he says revealed in us, I can tell you I'm a totally different person than I was before we came here. And I'm proud of the way that I've grown and stretched, but not for lack of a lot of suffering along the way.
Yeah. Well, and I love that. I love you pointing out that fact though, because I think that's important, right? I think that the ideal is we say, oh, I received inspiration. I act on the inspiration. I'm courageous and I reap the benefits of that courage, right? When the reality is I received inspiration. I act on the inspiration. I'm courageous, and it hurts and it hurts and it hurts, and it's highs and lows. And yet here I am at the end, and I can look back on that path and say, shoot, I'm way better for making the commitment to stay true to that process. So,
well, and that is why God is a fourth watch God, that revealed in us, so that anybody and everybody that knows your story can look back and say, there's only one way that worked. Because let's be real, this has been an internal conversation, a lot of in your own thoughts, a lot of between the two of you. But if I'm just going to be 100% authentic here, if Mike and Kelly Freeman are sitting in the pew and in your ward, and we hear the Blanchard sold everything and moved to Ecuador, we'd look at each other and be like, that's crazy. So how did you deal with that? Because there's got to be some people coming to you saying, it's almost like going to, hey, Lehigh, you're just a visionary, man. You're not,
there's the people that rally around you and support you, right? I mean, obviously our kids, the ones that are already in college are like, yep, that's my parents, right? And they're supporting it. And you've got the family around you and different people, but definitely there's many people, especially right before I was leaving my career, they're like, you're doing what? Why would you do that? It takes you decades to get to the position you're at in this company, and the knowledge you finally have to run a corporate world. You're going to walk away. Yeah.
We even had a friend in Ecuador say, don't come.
Economy's
bad. There's COVID.
That's a bing.
Successful. Don't come.
Yeah.
Wow.
Honestly, for me, it helps so much to just look up and not around, and keep my sights there. I kind of put on blinders, and I have to put on this, like, it's not that I don't care what you think, but I guess another Brene Brown quote. Well, she's quoting from Theodore Roosevelt's The Man in the Arena.
Oh, come on. It's on the wall.
Yeah. Awesome. So I love it because she says, if you're not in the arena getting your butt kicked, then I'm not interested in your criticism.
Yep, shut up.
And I mean, it doesn't even have to be that forceful. It can just be like, you know what? I've received inspiration, and it's okay that you don't understand the inspiration because you're not living my experience. So we oftentimes don't even ask people's opinions until we're so solid in our decision to move forward.
That's like Mitch Bard, Tyler, vertical, not horizontal, right? Focus on the vertical and the connection between me in heaven, and horizontal is going to be. And I honestly think there's just cool things that happen when you're doing things and people are asking, why would you do that?
Oh yeah.
Right. Because like that's swimming upstream. And I would love for my kids to live a life where their peers are like, why would you do that? That sounds hard. Yeah. Go for that. Right.
Yeah.
Not embrace the suck, but yeah, kind of embrace the suck.
Yeah.
Jump in that arena.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. That internal perspective helps a ton. Like staying grounded on why really are we here? You know, it's not really for comfort. Even when we moved to Costa Rica and I thought we would have mangoes on the beach. No, it was not mangoes on the beach, maybe once in a while.
Zip line to the beach every day.
Okay, maybe a little of that. But also it helps to, and I think it's a really great thing to teach your kids too. Like life isn't easy, and that's not why we're here. And if it is, if we go back to heaven and after this life and we haven't changed, we're going to feel gypped. We're going to feel like, man, I gave up my chance. You know, that was my chance for hyper growth.
Yeah. So I'm curious, Troy, last time you were on, you talked about intentional disruption, right? you use that quite a bit. So
Yes.
I don't know how much
The whole
more
time, hold on,
disruption.
Tyler.
Yeah.
The whole time he's talking, he's got this thing in the back of his head.
I know, right?
Actually, in
Yeah,
the front of
I
his
know.
head.
We almost blew that for him. But I'm curious, like this whole process to me is this like one giant mass of intentional disruption. So how do you keep that process going, and where do you find the value in that disruption? You know, where you currently are. I can't even think like disrupting what this looks like, but what are you doing right now to kind of continue to stretch and to grow?
Yeah. So I think waking up every day here in South America and trying to build industry and create jobs and connect people here to companies in the US and everything that we're undertaking does that, because it's out of that comfort zone. But I think if I went backwards, and I'm not saying for those listeners here that, you know, the scenarios that we're presenting should apply to them, but
Sure.
Results not typical.
I knew that I married this woman right here. And, you know, part of that is there's intentional disruption. And part of going forward was there was a point at the very, you know, probably 5 years ago, 6 years ago, that Daphne had always talked about, I want a career. I want to do something when the kids move out of the house. And so I opted to say, yeah, it'll be your turn. And so one of those, just by even saying that, already just leads you with a whole bunch of like that last podcast we had of Choose Your Own Adventures. We got whys in the road everywhere we go.
Yeah.
And I think even now to keep doing that disruption is always keeping an open mind, and then keeping the prayers going forward and acting on them, because most of the time the inspirations and where we are today and where we were 3 months ago and 6 months ago is I would have never fathomed we would be here. Right. Mm-hmm. And so, and I'm not saying physically in keto, I'm saying what we do daily. Right. And so also humanitarian efforts really, and serving in the local community and your local churches, all of those things give you that option, right? That's how I maintain intentional disruption. It's so easy just to not do anything on Sunday. It's so easy not to go do, you know, join humanitarian efforts. But when you force yourself to do that, it creates this disruption, which goes to the cycle of vulnerability. You learn and you grow. And like Daph said, it's been 1.5 years we've been here. And wow, we are not the same people. We have learned so much and gone through so much.
And I would say we've connected so much. I mean, it takes an insane amount of humility to say, I will put my career that I've been building for the last 20 years, I'll take another route so that you can have a fulfilling career. And I will forever be grateful to Troy for having that humility and to love me enough and respect me enough to see that my plan is of equal value as his plan. And if God is inspiring me to go a certain direction, which is not in line with where he really wanted to see himself in the future, to have that humility and that love for me, to be like, I will do this, is something that's really connected us. So as a couple, we've talked about the struggles, but one of the greatest things that's come from this is we've forged such a strong relationship. life is never boring for us. We keep that sense of being alive all the time. And just that love and respect for each other has grown to massive levels. And then together, our connection with the divine, because we're in that oh crap mode a lot, and we really need that divine help. So just, it doesn't even matter what it is that you're doing. If that humility is there and that equal respect is there can always be growth.
Man, I love it.
Okay,
I love it.
I'm going to throw this out there, and Tyler, just mark this. It might need to be edited.
All right.
Who knows where this will go. I'm just curious because, so I'm coming up on 25 years of marriage, and habits can set in. And what if those things that you just described, those feelings, those dreams or those desires that you've had, that you've been listening to and you've been feeding, what if they're dormant? Like what if somebody's in a position where they have surrendered their will for family, for kids, for supporting their spouse, and when it comes time, and maybe a dude listens to this and comes running out and sits down with the wife and wants to have a companionship inventory and says, honey, what do you want? And she has been in a role of other people's wants and needs, and it's asleep, right?
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Any thoughts on how to wake that up?
One thing I think about a lot is, what do you want to be when your kids grow up? And sometimes there's not even a thought about that because you're so busy in the trenches. And for me, I certainly did set things aside for a while, like, okay, we're going to build Troy's career. We're going to build a house. We're going to build a family. And I found a lot of joy in it. But when I stopped and really pondered, I think one of the biggest indicators is when you start feeling resentment or jealousy. So those to me are just indicators that someone has something that you value and you haven't put the mental energy towards it. So I would notice first, like, what makes you jealous? If you're in a conversation, this would happen to me a lot. Someone would be like, we just, moved out of the country with my husband's job. And I would get jealous and resentful, like, why doesn't it happen to me? And then just to stop and take note and go, oh, I must value that, and just write it down. So I actually wrote an article. I haven't even published it, but basically just for myself, what do I want to be when I grow up? And I think it's a really healthy exercise to stop and think. And then what's powerful too is, how has God helped me keep the pilot lit? The pilot light lit. I heard this concept years ago about keep the pilot light lit. So even though on the onset, I was like, I haven't done anything. I've been raising kids. I'm like, wow, which is amazing. By the way, I want to honor and value that role, because so much of my growth came from that. And I chose it, and I was blessed to be able to be a stay-at-home mom. I know that's not a blessing that everybody gets. So I was super grateful for that. But at the same time, I had to sacrifice certain things to have that dream of mine. And so there was a time where I didn't know what I had been doing over those years. And so I sat down and built a resume, which I think is a really cool exercise. And I think it was because I wanted to teach English, and I love teaching English to foreigners. And so that exercise was God's way of getting me to sit down and saying, look how I've been using your skills along the way. So I had started a Spanish immersion preschool to teach my kids. I was thinking I was just teaching my kids Spanish. Oh, that's a business of Spanish immersion. That's language, I had started nonprofits because I had this need to be global. Like inside, I feel like it was a God-given urging to be doing what we're doing now, to connect with other cultures, especially Latin America. And so to be able to scratch that itch while I lived in Utah, I would start a nonprofit. One was called Raising the Cane. Another one is Live to Learn. We had international students in our home. And so of course, wonderful people around us and all of those efforts. But when I started writing down these things, I realized, oh my goodness, I actually have kind of a full resume, but because I wasn't getting paid for it, I undervalued it. So that's my next suggestion is don't connect pay to experience, because no one is ever going to ask you, oh, did you get paid for that? Or how many hours did you work? They're just going to ask, how did you grow? What did you learn from it? What did you
know how to do it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think, to add to that, I think it's really easy to get comfortable. And I really think there's a section with kids that you just throw yourself all in. And I mentioned the concept before, there's two gutters, there's a can, and you kind of just get kicked down. So you're moving, you're progressing, but it's not really intentionally. And the idea of intentional disruption, I think it's pivotal, because I think that pulls people out of this almost relaxed, comfortable state. Sure, I'm fine if I keep doing what I'm doing for the next 10 years. And then you have to really reflect, are you really happy? If you are, then stay there.
Yes.
And if you're not, exit, pull the parachute.
Right.
Who in their 40s walks away from everything, right? It's like you need that inspiration. You need to know the intentional way of disruption and pull yourself out, right? And I think that those that are listening, they're like, I need to pivot it. I need to do it. You can do it.
Well, I think this last Sunday, I actually went to the Spanish-speaking branch here in Reading, and I heard a sister bear her testimony. She's coming back to God, right? She made some changes, and through tears, she said, "I lost time." And I love the gospel of Jesus Christ, and I love the hope, and I love the forgiveness that is available to me through the atonement. But I don't get that back. I don't get time back, right? Time lost is time lost. And Daphne is kind of like going back to God and saying, man, I missed my shot. I got one shot, and I was supposed to change. And I've probably shared this, Tyler, with you before, but just that idea of, the parable of the 10 virgins and knocking on the door. And he's like, I don't know you. And you think, oh my goodness, can you imagine if I'm supposed to become something, I'm supposed to use this mortal existence and choose the hard thing and choose to disrupt myself so that I can continue to grow and learn. And I don't become who I was supposed to be. And it comes time, it's like, oh, you're not Mike. Like, no, Mike, you were supposed to do this other thing. Like that stuff, right? That should keep us praying. That should keep. I love Troy in that last episode. You just that idea of morning routine, prayer, and then be curious and explore. Right? You've done the work. You've asked the questions. He knows your heart. He knows what you're looking for. He knows your needs. Now just go figure out how he's going to answer those questions, right? And be open about it, and not have those rails.
And to your question, if someone's gone dormant, how do you spark that again? I think for me, I just spent a lot of time talking to God, just like, what is it? And it's amazing how he brought things to my memory, times when I came alive, just taking stock. And it's amazing because I learned through this process, he cares about my growth and progress as much as he cares about Troy's, as much as he cares about my kids. And so he doesn't want me to put myself on the altar of sacrifice for motherhood. He wants me to bring my best version of me so that I can bless people around me, including my family, to way higher levels. And it does no one good if I'm saying, oh, I'm just going to release all my dreams and all these passions inside of me, all these urgings from the Spirit. And that gave me confidence after spending that time with God to tell Troy, hey, and I think it's important to use your voice. And at first, it may come out like really quiet, or it may come out really angry, depending on how much you've been holding on to that, but like sharing that is really important. And then staying true to it. I had to work through my own feelings of guilt. They call it the mom guilt when I went back to school. And my kids suddenly had to make their own lunches, and they didn't get picked up right after school. So somebody had to get a license. Oh, darn. She's motivated. And so the Spirit would give me these little nudgings saying, it's okay. It's okay that this is going to help them be more independent. This is for their growth too. Your growth equals their growth. And I think by staying close to the Spirit and helping me stay strong, like that first being was, yes, this is right. The second being was like, my family's going to suffer, but I think that was really helpful. And through that process, not only did I become a better version of myself, or have become and continue to become, my family has learned some valuable lessons about what they're capable of in the process.
If we look back on this whole journey that's led you to this point, can you look back on that and say, hey, here's some things that I would like to have embraced better, or I would do differently in this process?
I think right off the bat, the first thing that comes to my head is I question, and I'm sure there's other listeners that feel this way. I question how I can receive divine inspiration, which it's a miracle, right? And then continually question it after. The rockiness of being here, the throwing spaghetti ideas on the wall for month after month after month, and cashing out types of retirements, and the efforts that we had to go through, I took the stress on instead of being the opposite and saying, hey, it's okay. That's why I have these things. We're supposed to liquidate things so that we can go forth, because God wants us here. Yeah. And I think my paradigm, if I could have just shifted it, I wish I could have gone back in those stages and just been more confident, more in one with saying, I don't need to know. I just need to know the next step. Mm-hmm. I think that was the one thing that I would go back and embrace more. I don't know. What do you think, Daph?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think I would go back and tell previous version Daphne, like, you got this. You're just as capable. And if God wants you to do this, then you can do it, and you belong here. And I know that's easier to say once you've come on the other side of the imposter syndrome. But I guess that's what I would say to anyone who's struggling with that is, God first calls you and then he qualifies you. And that is the journey of life. And it's okay to feel in a continual state of discomfort, and just to be okay with that discomfort. And it doesn't mean you're not capable. It doesn't mean you're not as smart as the other people in the room. It means that you're brave enough to try something that is next level.
I love that. It's that whole 1 Peter 3:5, right? It's think it not strange, the fiery darts that fall upon you, right? They're going to be there, right? They're going to be there. It's part of the process.
Yeah.
Well, I think, Troy, you got me. I carry a question right now. I've been carrying it, Tyler. I think I talked to you about a month ago, 2 months ago, just that idea of, I have a spiritual tendency to forget God when it gets hard. And just thinking about why I think that is a human thing, but why do I do it, and how can I stop doing it? And the answer, really, I do love what you said. I don't need to know the whole thing, right? I don't need to know what the end is going to look like, or what this thing's going to look like 1,000 steps from now. I just want to know. I just need to know what's the next step. And I feel entitled sometimes to know I need to know the whole thing.
Yeah. And I think if I would have known what we know now and look back, then all that year and a half would have been so much easier, because then I would know why we were here and what the inspiration was, and the impact on our children, the impact on my son who just went on a mission, and the impact on developing people and being involved with hiring people and teaching. If I could have seen all of that, the end, I often wonder, why don't we get a glimpse of that? But there wouldn't have been that faith promoting growth. It wouldn't have been that putting that one foot in front of the other.
It's the reliance, the dependence, right?
Yes.
Yeah. We got to go back. We get it, and we got to go back and get more. And that's that line upon line. That's why it's in the program, right? We don't get the full. It's requiring that 100% dependence, reliance, and so that it's not you.
There's one thing that I want to make sure that hopefully this is helping others as they listen. it could be easily thought that, hey, you get inspired to move somewhere, so it's easier because you're being told to leave. I am such a firm believer that God wants what you want, that Daphne had a deep desire to be global, right? And that it's something that she innately wanted. And I believe that God will align with our interests. And if we really want something, it's just as important, just as inspirational. If you're like, hey, I want to change careers, and pray to it. And then all of a sudden you are going to see the hand of God come out, and he's going to help you go there. It's not always, I fear that sometimes when we're talking, that maybe a story or two feels like, a directive was given. And so therefore it's so much easier to follow. But the point is any pivot we want to have in our life, Heavenly Father is going to be there. That's why there's so many and countless amounts of your podcast. It's funny, my phone got full last night. My third number one was because I downloaded every one of your guys' episodes. And my point to that is there's so many best practices from hearing these people that come on.
Yeah.
And these best practices are something that we're supposed to absorb. And I think the takeaway here is, as we're going forward and taking those steps forward, that if we want to have that intentional living, or we want to change something, that once you pray, he will then inspire you, and then comes the faith, right? Then comes 100%. The faith to go towards what you want.
Yeah. It's interesting because as you're talking, I'm thinking I had a conversation with a leader that I really love and respect, and I was asking him some questions. And his response to me, these were in my mind, some very difficult questions. And he said, what do you think? That was his response. And I remember thinking, like, I don't know, man, that's why I'm talking to you, that was the point of this conversation, to dig me out of this, Yeah. But that idea of trust your ability to receive inspiration, right? Like, I think that even when we're talking about receiving inspiration and following that inspiration, I fall into that sometimes. Like, is this inspiration, or is this me putting something out there that I want, right? Is this, you know what I mean?
Yes, we talked about that. It was is it because of your desire to go international that we've been inspired, or are we really inspired to go do something that
right?
It's the chicken and the egg.
And the answer is yes.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
100%. I feel like he'll use you where, in ways that you want.
Yeah. I love that. The answer is yes, because I think there's probably a lot of people that listen to this that say, well, shoot, I want to do this thing. Is that thing inspiration, or is that just me like projecting my own desires into this thing? But I think I love that, Daphne. They're probably one and the same to a certain degree.
But
right?
I think the actual answer is the yes yesterday, right? Like, trust it when you got it, because so many times, like I just think I've been thinking lately of these gaps in my life that I need to close. And one of them is gaps between me and people that don't look like me or think like me. And that's a whole nother subject, because you guys are outside of the United States now, and you can probably look with some pretty clear eyes at what we've got going on here and kind of the mess that we might be in. But the other gap that I'm trying to close is the gap between when I feel something and when I do it, right? Like, I can pray to be of service to somebody, and then a thought will come to my mind, and I'll be like, oh yeah, I should probably do that in the next couple of days. No, it was yesterday. Like, but when that comes, let's try to close the gap between, man, I've been thinking about this person. Like, honestly, there is a visit that I'm supposed to have a month ago that just sitting there spinning in my brain. And that person's situation isn't getting any better. And that visit should have happened yesterday.
All right. So tomorrow you're going to take care of that. I have faith in you. I mean, that's going to happen, dude. But I will say this though, Mike, and I agree with you, but I think that I want people who are listening to this podcast to walk away with the idea that there's multiple on-ramps and multiple off-ramps, right? Like, because we didn't take action doesn't mean that ship has sailed, and therefore I cannot progress or move or get beyond or accomplish the thing that I want to accomplish, right? It's funny, you talk about this name ringing around in your head, right? I think that's true with all these principles, right? If we're inspired to make a change in our work or our family life or whatever that is, right? And we've put it off for a week, 10 days, 10 years, 20 years, does not mean that thing has passed. It's never too late.
I agree with that, but I think strength can't be purchased on Amazon Prime and delivered in a day.
Especially
right?
now, like Amazon is lagging, man. Like it's like 3 or 4 days. I'm like, come on, I'm paying extra, dude. Come on.
When the situation calls it, so when the Goliath presents itself, David goes back to his prior experiences that were done.
Absolutely.
That he had lived.
Right.
They weren't theoretical. It wasn't like, oh yeah, I meant to take on those other things. Like those things that we have an opportunity to do today will give us strength that God will use tomorrow, that God will need us to have tomorrow. And that's the only concern that I have, right? I have a concern for my friend, and I have a concern that I'm not becoming the person I need to become as I maybe procrastinate and delay some of these things that I know I need to do.
And interestingly, I feel like a lot of that is how we like those feelings of I've let this thing pass by. Those are the things that teach us how to embrace the next moment. Do you know what I mean? Like I feel like,
right. But I mean too, Troy, the last time we were talking, you were talking about conversations that you're having with your son, and your son is now in a different place, right?
Yeah.
So those conversations happened, or they did. Like my kid is not in my house anymore, so those conversations of raising him, that's kind of done. Like we still have conversations, and I'm still raising my kid, but that season to pour into him or her in those particular situations, we either did it or we didn't. And if we didn't, we sit in I think Robert Louis Stevenson said, we all eventually sit down to a buffet of consequences.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that.
But going back to what Tyler's talking about is that you can get back on the freeway. And even though the kids are out of the house, it's fascinating to me of how they don't need you less, right?
Totally.
It's just what you're doing, what you used to do to mentor and teach and guide and connect and communicate has just changed to a different form. And so when your daughter calls and just says, hey, everything might be overwhelming, Daph always has this concept of don't, quit on school, don't quit on life. Like you're not trapped in anything. You're not trapped in a job. You're not trapped in going to class. I don't care if you're right before finals, drop out. Who cares? Absolutely. Nobody, when they hire you down the road, goes, do you have W's on your transcript? I mean, it doesn't matter, right?
Right.
And so it's that perpetual ability to be able to continue to be involved in their life more than financially that you guys brought up last week.
Yeah. I mean, even like the conversation of you made it into BYU. Nobody cares if you're taking calculus, drop the class,
Totally.
It's that, or you're going to fail the semester. Or you're in bed and you're trying to fall asleep, but a child's name, call this child is on repeat, and you call them and you get a hello, and they're not in the best situation, like, okay, I'm not getting off the phone until you get out of the car,
Yeah.
So I love that you brought that up. It is still a really influential time of life.
Living abroad with your kids not here, it is difficult, and there's times that you feel guilt. And one of the ways that we felt, just one, that we're supposed to be here, and two, that we could still be close to their lives, is something that I think I didn't do as much, especially when I was in the States, but really pray to be inspired for just those little moments that you need to call and reach out to them. And
he's always been very good at that, by the way.
I feel like when you're praying for that, it comes, and it's not, she brought up a few examples, but there's examples of of calling and somebody's in a parking lot crying. And how, statistically, tell me, if they're crying in a parking lot for 30 minutes in a 7-day week that I haven't talked to them once, How is it that I called right as they were there crying in a parking lot? Why? It's because we're keeping that conduit open. We're praying for that inspiration, and you'll find that your influence is equal when they're out of the house.
Yeah. Yep.
And
I agree with that.
And your influence is all you have.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, parenting adult children, we talked about that. Like, in the end, they are going to be free to make some choices. And do they care what dad thinks? What kind of relationship do they have with mom and dad? And is that influence something that is going to have sway in their life? If you've laid the foundation, great. Yeah. If you haven't, it's like, well, Dad, you're kind of a wreck right now, so I don't think I'm going to take any of your advice.
I love we're all kind of in the same boat right now where we've got kids, right, in that next phase of life. But man, the conversations that we have now are so much different than they were when they were 13, 14, 15, 16. I can say things that I probably wouldn't have said in those circumstances when they were at that age, that are probably a little more honest, right? Probably a little more real. And I think that they're hungry for that, that kind of direction. So
a little more open, because they're in a vulnerable state on their own. And I feel like to the level that you invest in your family and your kids, it's not quantity, it's quality at this stage, but you keep investing. And if you haven't invested to a level that you feel proud about, maybe there's a little regret, you just start investing now. Kids are they are the most forgiving creatures on the planet. They just want to feel loved. And if that loving starts today, then great. And one thing we've done is we've just continued to invest in our family and continue to make time, carve out space for them, make things special, keep traditions or change traditions. I mean, traditions have to change, but just having a tradition of we get together and then we can revamp it to suit our circumstances. Yeah, that's powerful to keep us all united.
So I'm just thinking of our listeners, and I want to go back and I just want to highlight this principle that Daphne just taught us. Quit on school, not on life. There may be some folks that are hanging on to something because this idea that winners don't quit. Right?
Okay, that's me, man. I'll do that till I'm like, beat my head against a wall, man. It's brutal.
Yeah, and I think I remember being programmed by my mom. Like, I was on the worst little league team in the world. It was like, get me off of this thing. And she's like, winners don't quit. It's like, actually, I love you, Mom, and I didn't quit, and it taught me a lesson. But winners quit all the time, right? Winners quit the right thing at the right time, all the time. And I think that if there's somebody white knuckling this thing that is just dragging them down, and it's actually impacting in other aspects of their life, man, green light, right? Green light to let some things go, because in the eternal perspective, if we zoom out, that quit on school, not on life, I dig that. I ideally, drop the class in that little window of time where it's a W and not like
WF.
Yes.
I think go ahead, Troy. Go for it.
Okay. I think it's so important that parents that are listening to this, that they embrace that, they identify and connect with their children in that aspect of knowing, is it really the best? Because intuitively, somebody's thousands of dollars into tuition and all of a sudden they want to drop out of school, but they're going through depression. They might be going through anxiety. It could be any one of our children that we don't even know about, and it onsets. And we have to be in tune to be able to say, instead of what we've been conditioned and what we've been taught and what we've learned over the years, stop, pause before you speak, ponder, and realize, is this really that important? We have the benefit of living in a different culture completely. And so some of the things when we fly back to the US, which we do frequently, people get caught up on things that just don't matter. And then parents hold strong to things that don't really matter. Meanwhile, their child's going through deeper and deeper depression, and heaven forbid they head towards some sort of suicidal tendency. And then they'll look back and say, all of that meant nothing, but I forced them to stay in school because of money, or I forced them to do X. And so I feel like if we can take a moment and think through that and ponder and pause and try to really say, is this a good tradition? Is this a good saying that I was taught that I need to keep going with? Because it's not the same world anymore.
Mhm.
And we have to be in tune for that.
And let them be inspired for their own lives. And, it's been really cool to do that process, with our kids saying, okay, what do you feel like? You're not trapped in this. What inspiration we're getting? Well, I'm feeling that I should not go to school. Okay. Talk to me about that. Well, actually not all school, just to reduce the number of credits. Okay, let's work through that. What are you feeling? And help them through that process and to unstuck themselves, I think, is one of our greatest powers, and letting them be inspired for themselves, because a lot of times they stay in things because of these social pressures, and maybe not even from outside, but coming from within.
Or expectations, right? My mom expecting this, my dad what are the people in my ward going to say? Like whatever. But we take that leader's trick and we just ask them what they think.
Yeah.
And it gives them permission to receive, or honor maybe some revelation that they've received in their own life, because last time I checked, they're entitled to that.
And to see that this is a journey. I think that it's really great that we talk about like what they want their futures to be, but when it starts in 7th grade, there's a lot of pressure to know exactly what you're going to do. And that pressure sometimes just builds and builds and builds over the years, but to step back and be like, it's okay, you're on a journey, and however long that takes. And I really love this quote by Sharon Eubank where she says, doing better doesn't mean doing more. So sometimes you gotta eliminate things out of your life.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You're getting the true growth instead of getting stuck in that anxiety spiral.
I love that. Go ahead, Troy.
Well, one thought I just had, we were talking about that. I got to go to my brother's, right? And I always hesitate because I want to make sure, I'm sending love and, out to all 3 of them. But there's one, Jared, that my brother is just incredibly successful, super connected with his kids. And that's what I mean by success. Very loving father. And he took 12 years to get a 4-year degree. 12 years, and went to 3 colleges. And guess what? Nobody cares. And he is just an amazing man. And, I look back and think, well, my other brother got right off his mission, became manager, worked his way up, and, is running this massive corporation at the same time that my other brother seemingly to the world isn't progressing or doing anything that we feel, but he was the person he became and the person through that journey of those 12 years. And so the net effect, I think a lot of times we get ourselves into this little box of the way something should be. And it's not. Everybody's, personal journey is unique to them. And it
goes to Daphne's points about experiences gained, and that's not necessarily getting paid for it, right? Or in this journey, we are picking up experiences, and in the end, last time I checked, people matter. Our relationships with people, our ability to connect with people, that's what people get paid for. Right. And so as you're going through this journey and having these experiences, you're gaining identity, an understanding of who you are. You're gaining an understanding of how your strengths and weaknesses can be, compensated and in partnership with other people, how to react and work with other people. And all of those have real world marketable skills that people get paid for.
In the grand scheme, right? Progression matters. Right. Yeah. And we've talked about this, like delete the timeline, right? Especially like, you talk to your kids and again, they're all so different, but I've got a couple of pretty driven, right? Like I got to do this by this, and this happens, and then this happens, and this
careful.
happens.
Quinn comes home, right? You know how that is coming home from the mission and that drive. And it's like, I got to give out 4 books today. It's like, no, relax.
Yeah. Well, he's go
surfing.
He's been surfing several times. but I just delete that timeline and let's focus on progression and how do we become a better version of ourselves? What are we doing? At the end of the day, Troy, it doesn't, whether it's 4 years or 12 years, right? Who cares as long as the change is there, the progression is there, right?
And I want to bring up, because we're talking a lot about making big, bold choices, like in intentional decisions of growth. But what happens when you get to grow by not getting what you want? The answer is stay. Or for me, I've applied to the State Department twice and the answer was no. And it's hard. I think sometimes the growth comes and you feel like, talking about time, you feel like you're missing time. Like, man, I'm 46. Like, we don't have time for this. I got to pass. I got to get in, but really God had a different plan. And you don't know it until looking back, like those 2 years, wow, I needed to be home. Like, it is so good. I did not pass that first time. So good because what our family went through, I needed to be there. I was like the family counselor for my kids and teaching them how, I was being taught by the Spirit and how to heal and overcome struggles that were really deeply painful. And the Spirit was guiding me on the step-by-step process. These are the steps you need to take. You need to share it with your family. And I couldn't be totally immersed in a brand new career. And at the time I was a little bit bitter, like, well, when do I get what I want?
Yeah.
So looking back, to your point of like, when it's done, I would not give up that time and that growth with my kids, my family, and with myself at that time. And so sometimes it comes from not getting what you want. And sometimes there's growth that comes from other people's bad decisions around you, and you have to deal with the consequences of those. So sometimes growth just means being like flexible and in tune to the Spirit with whatever gets thrown at you.
Stay nimble.
Stay nimble. It's interesting though, because we hear all the time, people will say, well, God has a perfect plan for each of us. Right. And I think when we hear that, we think a perfect plan is a straight shot, right? That's what a perfect plan looks like. But all of this like pain and this suffering and this, the difficulties are all part of that, right? You think of you think of Troy and Daphne, newlyweds, right? Or new parents, and diving into Ecuador like you are now. What would that look like then? And what does it look like 20 years down the road with experience and trials and hardships and struggles? So now you're in this place where you're throwing spaghetti on the wall, and it's not total panic. There may be some panic, but it's not total panic, right? You're looking at it going, we've been through some stuff and we can get through some stuff, right? And sometimes I think that idea of God has a perfect plan for each of us, we want to distill that down to, it's a 5-step process. We do A, B, C, D, and E, we get what we need. But really it's that perseverance, that ability to kind of say, all right, I trust that I'm not getting what I want right now, but this is going to work for my benefit down the road. And that's a hard place to be. I still work. Yeah, I'm still stuck in that, right? Like there's times where I'm like, yeah, I get it. And there's times like, no, like now I want it. Like now it has to happen, right?
And he's really, really concerned in revealing that glory in all of us. Like that's really what matters. So if I stop and say, no matter what happens with the company success-wise, if by a worldly standard, like I'm finally fluent. It took me 25 years of learning this language, but by living and breathing it for a year, it's like, finally, that was a big desire in my heart, And so it's cool to see how I've grown as a person. And that's really what God is interested in, more than those like physical mile markers that we all want to count as success.
Results.
Totally. Yeah.
So, hey, I don't know, Troy, we've actually stepped up our game since last time you were on our podcast.
Have we?
Oh,
what have we done?
progression, Tyler. We have drastically improved our podcast skills. Not really, but we've added one question that I wanted to pose to the two of you. You may have heard it on other episodes, but since the last time you were on the podcast, we've gotten the habit of asking people to paint us a picture, right? And I'd love for this to be an Ecuador picture where you looked around at the circumstance or the scene or who you were with, and you actually thought to yourself, now this is rich.
I've got two that immediately come to my head. I was driving down and I'm with some of the kids in the car, and we're going down out of Quito into the valley, and I see a tent. And in that tent, I felt compelled to pull over. And there was about 12 people in it, of which 8 were under the age of 6. There was multiple women, 1 man in the tent, and there are 2 babies screaming, crying, and they're sleeping on the sidewalk on a tent with no pads. I cannot tell you how overwhelmed I was in that moment, with all watching firsthand of everybody exiting Venezuela, people living on the streets, and having this realization that although we want to create a large change, that we can affect change. And to be able to help provide jobs for people that have gotten their 4-year degree or master's degree and are unemployed for a year straight, that is what the reality is down here in Ecuador. Extremely talented people. And to be a part of God's hand, to be able to connect them to jobs in the US, whether it's just connecting professional services or customer service, it feels like it's work with a purpose, with a social impact. And that, to me, I look back and go, wow, it's not financially where we wanted to be. It's not looking at anything else. It's looking at, when I left BYU in 2013, I was blessed to go get a degree there, a master's degree. And lots of people take pictures by the sign, but it says, go forth and serve.
The world is our campus.
Enter to learn, go forth to serve.
Yeah.
And I have felt over and over in the different situations that we have been in that we are so unique. As a nation, we're unique to be able to just go away when you turn 19 and go to school and get grants and get student loans, and all of a sudden you're in an educational system. Yes, there's other countries that do that, but we're unique. And there's very few nations that do that. And for me to have the experiences that I had, for mentors and teachers and all the people that contributed to help me become who I am, what is the most beautiful part? It's that aspect of serving, right? And we can serve even though some people think, oh, I'm not serving because I get a paycheck. That's so not true. You go to work every day and you choose to either share the light of Christ. You choose to go forth and go the extra mile and help somebody when it's not your job description. You can serve every day at work. And to find ourselves living a rich life of being able to have people come to us and say, thank you, I was unemployed. I was sleeping in a gas station on the way to get the job interview with you with a child at home and haven't eaten for a day. And to be able to connect that person with a US company that now can provide, and now we get to serve in that capacity. I mean, I look back and say, 2 things I told you I could see now, that, and then embracing my son when he had to leave, hugging my daughter and my other daughters and my son-in-laws that have all been able to participate in this experience. And then my son departing on a mission, who's going to go forth and give up 2 years of his life to serve, and him embrace us and say, had we never moved to Ecuador, I would not be serving a mission. That, being in tune, that's the rich life.
That's it. That's worth it.
Let's go. Come on now.
It. Daphne, what do you got? Anything come to mind as I asked that question?
Yeah, there's a snapshot for me. It's, as I mentioned, I wanted to work, I said in the beginning, for or with the State Department. And then, I got real stuck on my own plan. But it turns out that God wanted me to work with the State Department instead of for it. And there's this moment in time where I felt like, wow, we've made it as far as this is rich. And that was standing in Monte Sinaí, which is one of the most rough neighborhoods in Ecuador, and seeing the governor, the local police, the community leaders, our friends from Ecuador, our friends from the United States who had served their mission there 30 years ago, and seeing all of these people working together to help lift the people around them. It was so powerful. And I'll never forget little 4-foot Bachita, who is now sitting in the governor's office and has a voice for her community And seeing her stand up and use that voice and tell him, we don't have bathrooms and there's 1,700 kids and we have 2 weeks till the kids come back to school. How can you help us? And to be able to help empower her when really she is the hero of this story, because she has been leading a group of 15 women in that community every day, providing lunches, creating an Olympics day out of a bottle filled with water as their soccer ball. And to me, to be able to use the skills that I have been given little by little, so little I didn't even recognize it for a long time, to be able to see how Heavenly Father's taken all of these experiences and culminated it into this unique ability to bring these people together. And I was told, and it really resonated with me, in a blessing I was given, that I'm a uniter. And I'm like, yay. To me, it's rich to be able to see how I can contribute and to see how I can use those skills and that I've gained through all of these experiences, be it callings, when I was asked to run a road show, or when I was asked to be Young Men's president, thank you, Tyler, while I was in the middle of my master's. Well, I learned so
who would
much.
do that?
Who would do that?
You did not do that to that.
I
that
wrestled
woman.
for about a half hour and begged, and the answer was, you got this. And I learned so many executive skills through that process that all came together for me to be able to stand on this dirt road, look around and be like, I made it. My heart has tugged for this for years, and I'm here, and I feel like I'm fulfilling that mission. And that's rich to me.
I love that. It's like that for such a time as this moment. Everything before it has led to you being there to be able to make that difference. Man, there's a special place in Bishop's Hall of Fame to be able to extend that call, Tyler Gould.
It's called ignorance is bliss, man. Ignorance is bliss, right?
That was some courage right there.
I love talking to you guys. I miss having you guys right around the corner from us, for sure.
We could use some uniters up here in the United States of America, that's for sure.
Right.
But this has been just a fun night to spend some time with you guys. And we end every episode the same way. And I'm going to give you guys, I want each of you to answer this question. And Troy, you've had a crack at it once, and here we are with a little time down the road. I'd love to hear from you, Troy, since the last time we talked, what it means to you to be considered the richest man in town. And Daphne, I definitely want to hear your perspective on where you're at and what it means to you to be considered the richest woman in town. And so I'm going to let Troy go first, because I want to end with your words, Daphne.
It's so clear to me that if we can just shed everything else and focus in on inspiration, that there's nothing more beautiful than sharing and helping somebody else figure out how to receive inspiration, to be peaceful, to listen, and to feel the divine hand of God in their life and their influence. And everybody feels it a different way. And you ask me, what does it mean? It is to see people around me that I've been able to work with, serve with, and sit here with, and knowing that that is the most important thing, is following inspiration.
So for me to be the richest woman in town is to be surrounded by the incredible people who've been a part of my path. Every time God asks me to do something hard, he builds a team around me. Every time I reach a point where I can't move on, he sends someone. He sends just the right person. And I'm not even going to start naming names, but every night and every morning, I thank Heavenly Father for the incredible people that he's put around me. And that's rich, to have meaningful, loving, just impactful relationships around you, to share something meaningful together and to feel supported by each other. I've been so richly blessed in that way.
I love it. I love you guys. You guys are amazing, man. I feel like I need to do something amazing, Mike. You know, I mean, what am I doing here in San Diego for crying out loud?
That's the whole point. You hang out a couple hours with the Blanchards. You better make tomorrow freaking incredible, Tyler.
You're calling that guy. You're calling that guy.
I'm calling that
That's
guy.
right.
I'm going to visit that guy. But I think, honestly, I love this idea of journey, and I love this idea of people coming along and helping, because that's every hero story we've ever read, or every hero story we've ever seen in the movie, right? You guys are on this incredible journey, and God's kind of putting some team and some people around you in order for you to live out this incredible life. And I have learned how to be a better man, a better husband, better father, and that's what this is about. We've talked to people now for a couple of years, and it's always, Tyler, it's always about who cares what happens after we release this. It's in the moment with the guest. Is this hitting? And is this changing things? And I feel like it's definitely delivered. So I was excited to hear. I was excited to follow up, like post this move to Ecuador. And I just love what it's done for you, right?
We appreciate you guys so much, and we're grateful for you taking some time to be with us tonight. Let's connect again soon. Hopefully, when you're in San Diego again, we're gonna have dinner and.
Yes.
Hey,
Troy,
together.
I'm actually going to be down there for Turkey Bowl, so I don't know if you're going to, kind of cool.
You guys make it for Thanksgiving? Come on down.
Yeah.
Hotel
Thank
Gold's
you
open.
guys. We feel honored to be here.
Such an honor to be here.
Such a spiritual lift from hearing everybody's thoughts, and just great to be a part of this great show. So thank you.
Hey, Troy, you killed it the first time, but with Daphne, it's definitely an upgrade. So well done.
Yeah.
I agree always.
Well, we appreciate you guys. Have a good night.
Keep going.
Yeah, you too. Take care.
Bye.
Good idea, Ernie. A toast to my big brother George, the richest man in town.